A butchered body, unbearable pain, and a smell so bad it made courtiers faint. After he died, bodily fluids leaked from his coffin and were licked up by stray dogs. This was the grim end of one of history's most feared kings. Today, we're telling the real story of Henry VIII's death, a tale so gruesome it hardly gets told in full. Henry Tudor was born on June 28, 1491. When he became king at just 17, he was seen as the most handsome prince in Europe. He was tall, athletic, with striking golden red hair and a commanding presence. A Venetian ambassador once said he had an extraordinary figure and looked more beautiful than any other Christian prince. So, how did such a strong and mighty king meet such a humiliating fate? It all changed with an accident in January 1536 during a jousting tournament in Greenwich. At 44 years old, Henry had a horrific fall when his horse collapsed on him. He was unconscious for 2 hours, and while he survived, his right leg was badly hurt and never fully healed. This wound turned into an open ulcer, releasing a foul smell that announced his arrival before he even walked into a room. It was a severe embarrassment for a man so vain. Courtiers had to tolerate the stench without showing disgust, or they'd face the king's wrath. This accident also changed his behavior. Coincidentally, around this time, he ordered the execution of his second wife, Anne Boleyn, on made-up charges of adultery and treason. Some historians believe the brain injury from the fall worsened his paranoia and anger. As his mobility decreased, he began to gain weight rapidly. His waist, which was 89 centimeters in his younger days, ballooned to over 130 centimeters. He ended up weighing more than 180 kilograms, making him so obese that they had to use a pulley system to move him between royal apartments. Even the door frames in the palace had to be widened for him to fit through. His diet played a big role in his decline. Kitchen records show he consumed about 5,000 calories a day, mostly from red meats and very few vegetables. A typical dinner included multiple meat pies and lots of wine and beer. This strict routine, paired with enforced stillness, sped up his decline. The ulcers on his legs kept getting worse. The doctors used treatments that we now know were harmful. Things like cauterizing with hot iron, mixtures with arsenic and mercury, and constant bloodletting that just made him weaker. The wounds became so bad that you could see his bones through the rotting flesh. It smelled so awful that you could detect him from 3 rooms away. At 49, Henry married Catherine Howard, a bride only 19 years old. He thought this marriage brought back his youth, but the age gap, along with his failing health, turned it into a disturbing sight. Catherine, unable to deal with her deformed and foul-smelling husband, sought comfort with a young musician. When Henry found out, he had both of them executed. His last marriage to Catherine Parr in 1543 was more about politics than love. Catherine played more of a nurse than a wife, caring for the dying king with surprising dedication, especially considering what happened to his previous wives. In his final years, Henry faced several medical issues. Modern experts think he likely dealt with diabetes, severe gout, high blood pressure, and heart problems. Some even propose syphilis, though many historians debate this. This mix of ailments turned his last years into a time of constant suffering. Accounts say he swung between unbearable pain, screaming and cursing, and deep sadness, sitting still for hours. His paranoia grew as his physical health declined. The former wise leader became fixated on imaginary plots, executing friends and loyal advisors over wild suspicions. Fear filled the court, a careless comment or a misinterpreted glance could lead to a treason charge. Notably, he ordered the execution of Henry Howard, the Earl of Surrey, just 9 days before his own death. His fear of poisoning morphed into an obsession. He set up a complicated food safety system, requiring servants to taste every dish before it reached him. All utensils were examined closely. This fixation might have shown his growing mental instability or been triggered by recurring minor strokes. As Henry neared his end, his pain reached heights that were almost beyond belief. In those last months, he struggled to move, even with help. Gangrene had taken hold of his legs, making the already awful smell even worse. The royal court turned into a stench-filled space, filled with hushed gossip, as courtiers held perfume-soaked handkerchiefs to their noses, forcing themselves to stay near the king. During his final winter in 1546–47, Henry's health quickly declined. He battled frequent fevers, likely from multiple infections in his body. Breathing became harder, and he often slipped into delirium. Those who witnessed it said he would mumble the names of his departed wives, especially Jane Seymour, who died after giving him his only legitimate son, and possibly Anne Boleyn, whose ghost was said to haunt him. Strangely enough, despite his clear decline, no one at court dared to say he was dying. English law considered it a crime to predict a king's death. So, doctors and courtiers kept up the pretense that Henry might recover, even as the smell of decay began to seep from his living body. On January 27, 1547, realizing his time was short, Henry finally called for Archbishop Thomas Cranmer to come to him. Unable to speak, he squeezed Cranmer's hand when asked if he died a Christian. It was his last conscious act. In the early hours of January 28th, he took his final breath at just 55 years old. But even death brought no dignity. His massive size meant they had to build a special coffin to hold him. Preparing his body for the funeral proved to be a gruesome task for the royal embalmers. Back then, embalming was basic, mostly just removing organs and stuffing the cavities with herbs. As his body laid in wait for the state funeral, one of the most grotesque incidents related to Henry's death occurred. The coffin, not sealed well enough to hold in the gases and fluids of decay, began to leak while resting in Can Abbey's chapel. By night, accounts tell of a disturbing sight. Putrid fluid dripped onto the chapel floor, where it was discovered by stray dogs who licked up the foul substance. Chroniclers of the time captured a deeply humiliating end for a king who had built a reputation on power, grandeur, and divine right. Henry, once mighty who boldly defied the Pope, reshaped English faith and sent 2 wives to their doom, ultimately became a rotting mass of flesh, his body disfigured by street animals. His funeral took place on February 16th, 1547, nearly 3 weeks after he died. Even with the horrible stench from the coffin, the ceremonies were filled with all the grandeur expected for such a mighty king. He was laid to rest in St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle, next to Jane Seymour, his only wife who gave him the longed-for son, Edward VI. Ironically, Edward's life, born from Henry's many drastic decisions, including his break with Rome, was short-lived. He ruled for just 6 years before dying from illness at 15. The throne then passed to Mary, the first daughter of Catherine of Aragon, who tried to undo her father's Protestant reforms, and then to Elizabeth, the first daughter of Anne Boleyn, who would lead England into a golden age. Henry VIII's grotesque death stands as a stark reminder of the limits of human power. The king who saw himself above the law able to change the national religion and decide the fate of lives, was eventually a victim of his failing body. His death marked not just the end of one man but the decline of an era. Historian Alison Weir pointed out the irony. A man who started with so much promise and talent ended as a sad parody of himself, plagued by pain and mental struggles. Feared and flattered, he was seldom truly loved. The change from an ideal Renaissance prince to an obese, ailing tyrant is a captivating study in how absolute power, mixed with chronic pain and disease, can warp a person. His political legacy, the split from Rome and the birth of the Anglican Church, still influences our world today. But his personal decline is a stark reminder of human frailty. The last moments of Henry's life, with his heavy breathing and twisted body, stand in sharp contrast to the royal portraits that depict him in full power and glory. This gap between public image and reality is striking. Henry VIII's life and death teach us a crucial lesson: image versus reality. His story didn't end in glory, but instead with a ghastly stench, a fittingly unkingly end. He was a man who changed England and shaped Western history, yet he ultimately fell victim to the same fate as everyone else: our bodies decay. Henry's death wasn't just another moment in history. It symbolized how fleeting power really is. In his last years, as his health declined, so did the myth that kings were untouchable. The monarchy, which considered itself above nature's rules, had to face its own mortality. Ironically, the king who fought so hard for a male heir, even breaking from the church and executing 2 wives, ended up with a weak son who died young. His true legacy? His daughters, especially Elizabeth I, the child of the woman he unjustly condemned. The biggest takeaway from Henry VIII's death is that not even the most powerful can escape the limits of the human body. The king who bent laws to satisfy his needs could not defy nature's unwritten rules. Ultimately, even the mightiest king meets the same end as the humblest peasant. Henry's death isn't just a tale of medical nightmare, it's a moral lesson about human limitations and the inevitability of decay. His once esteemed body became a reminder that all earthly glory is temporary. This story serves as a reminder: in the face of death, we're all equal, regardless of our achievements. The dreadful demise of Henry VIII captivates and terrifies because it exposes the fragile humanity behind an image of absolute power.